Well, for decades now, those on the left have pushed what was once called the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, is now called the Equality Act. Ed Vitagliano, Abraham Hamilton III, Walker Wildman. Abe, explain what the Equality Act is and where the idea for it comes from.
Yeah, the Equality Act is a piece of legislation that has been a desire for those amongst what I describe as a sexually deviant political agenda movement for quite some time now, which basically seeks to add gender identity and sexual orientation to the level of protected classes of people within the framework of the civil rights legislation within the United States of America. So think the Civil Rights Act of 1964, housing discrimination, and so on and so forth. In addition to the established civil rights criteria, gender identity and sexual orientation will be added. And so what this will effectively do is accomplish the agenda of Kai Feldblum. You might know that name if you follow AFA, formerly on the EEOC commission. She was the brain trust, if you will, behind the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. The Employment Non-Discrimination Act, which now actually puts into law her desires, which wherever religious liberty and sexual liberty, as she described it, conflict with one another, religious liberty will always lose. The Equality Act seeks to do that within congressional statute.
Well, Walker, there are a lot of corporate sponsors for the newest version of that, the Equality Act of 2019. There is some bipartisan support for it, it appears. It is probably sure to pass in the House, which is controlled by Democrats, and so it depends on what happens in the Senate. This is a pretty dangerous piece of legislation. The Equality Act sounds great, but it really is, as Abe described, it really is going to put religious liberty further in the crosshairs of those on the progressive/regressive left.
Yeah, and we've known this all along, those of us who keep up with this kind of stuff, is that the left didn't just want, quote, marriage by the Supreme Court. They wanted more than that. They want forced capitulation to their agenda, and they want full-on approval of their lifestyle. And so we see that here, and this really foreshadows what they would do should they gain control of not just the House, the Senate, and the White House. And it will, history shows it will happen again. Democrats will control both chambers and the White House. So this is the stuff they'll do, and it's dangerous, and it's definitely a threat to the First Amendment.
Well, we are going to obviously continue to watch the progress of this bill in its current form now. As I mentioned, it's come up over and over again in Congress. It looks like it has the possibility of perhaps making a dent in Republican opposition in the Senate. We'll keep an eye on it, and we do appreciate you tuning in for this edition of Reason and Company.